Hi, Grandma here, and I am reading the Golden Goblet, and I'm in the middle of chapter 10. I'm going to read the very end of chapter 10, beginning on page 161 in my book, if you're following along. So Gebu is now back with the stonecutters, and he's he's going to learn to be a really good stonecutter. And he has been given a job of going through some scrolls, and he's found a scroll that shows an extra room in a tomb, and it just doesn't make sense. He took it to his stepbrother, and his brother threw the scroll aside impatiently. A moment later, he picked it up. He was a stonecutter's apprentice, and tedious though it might be, he had to resolved to learn this trade. He carried the scroll into the shop and looked around for pie. Instead, he saw Gebu just straightening from his inspection of the finisher's progress on a limestone slab. "Well," Gebu grunted, "what do you want? Why are you standing there?" "I want to ask a question of pie about this scroll." "Ask it then of me. I'm the master here." Wishing he'd thrown the scroll in the Nile, Ranofer silently unrolled it and pointed to the little chamber. "This room, I do not understand its purpose." Instead of an answer, he got a blow on the head that sent him sprawling on the gritty floor. "Impudent mongrel!" Gebu flung the words at him like stones. "Why should you understand it? You'll do what you're told here and nothing more. Do you understand me?" He leaned down, snatched the scroll from Ranofer's hand, and thrust it into the folds of his sash. His face was contorted with rage. Ranofer had seldom seen him look more vicious. Dazed by the blow and completely unexpected reaction he had provoked, Ranofer could only stare. "Up with you," Gebu snapped, digging the copper-sheathed toe of his sandal into the boy's ribs. "Back to work and keep your questions to yourself hereafter." He strode off across the shop, and Ranofer escaped to the scroll room, consumed with resentment and bitterly resolved that he was through with trying to be of value in the shop. He finished the day in silence, as sullen as that of the other apprentice, Nibre, whose stony indifference to men and work alike he was beginning to understand very well indeed. In the late afternoon, Winneman came into that shop and glided in his chilling, cat-like way toward the statue base Gebu was measuring. Watching the two from beneath sulkily lowered lids, Ranofer saw Gebu walk quickly to meet him and draw him aside. They conferred a moment, then the scroll was produced from Gebu's sash and transferred to Winneman's. "Hateful thing," Ranofer thought as he stretched the red chalk string across a block of granite. "I hope it brings both of them bad luck. I had the roof of that imbecile little room falls in on them while they are building it. I hope it is a stupid mistake they have made in their stupid drawings, and that the owner of the tomb will have them lashed and refuse to pay and discredit them all in the city of the dead. And that Pharaoh hears of it and sends him far away into the desert to labor in the gold mines. That should please Gebu, greedy thief that he is." Unfortunately, all the ill wishes he could invent were not powerful enough to rid him of Gebu's stubborn presence here in Thebes. Ranofer forced the scroll and his own anger to the back of his mind. It only made him hotter than on an already oppressive day. That evening after work, he met Hecate in the thicket and told him about it. "I only asked a question," he finished sulkily, "and I get a cuff that makes my ears ring all day. He won't even let me learn his craft, much less the one I want." "Perhaps there's something secret about that little room, something he did not want you to find out." "Nay, how could there be? It was drawn there on the scroll. Anyone could see it." "But did you not say he gave the scroll to Winneman later?" "Aye, but there's nothing unusual in that. I told you they worked together often. Let's not talk about it any more. I'm sick of the subject." The subject was not closed, however. Later that evening, much later, for he'd even less desire than usual to go home, and had dawdled about until almost nightfall, he opened the gate of the courtyard to find Gebu waiting for him, grim-jawed. Hoping it was only the coppers he wanted, Ranofer went directly to him and put them in his hand. He turned quickly toward the storeroom, but Gebu spun him around. "Now I want an explanation of that question you asked today. I want no lies either. Make haste, speak." "I only asked the purpose of that little room. What harm is there in that?" One of Gebu's fists rose more swiftly than Ranofer could dodge and struck him a glancing blow across the mouth, which nevertheless felt as if he'd loosened half of his teeth. "I know what you asked. I want to know why you asked it." "Because I'm trying to learn your hateful trade," Ranofer shouted. "I was trying to grow skillful. I was trying to understand how tombs are made and shrines are built. Never fear, I am finished with that now. I intend to do what I'm told and not the slightest bit more." He fell silent, trembling with anger and with fright at his own temerity. One did not shout at Gebu without paying for it, somehow an hour later. No matter, Ranofer thought, let him beat me. It is worth it sometimes. However, Gebu only stared at him fixedly, the one eye blinking. There was no possible way of telling what was going on behind that stony mask of his face. After several minutes, that seemed a lifetime each, he turned away and walked to the gate and went out. Ranofer's knees gave way from weariness and discouragement. He sat down where he was on the rough stones of the pavement and did not think of it all for a while. After some time, he became conscious of a trickle of something on his chin. He touched it gingerly and drew his hand away, smeared with blood. His split lip was beginning to swell painfully. He got to his feet, walked to the storeroom, tugged open the door, feeling the saliva pour into his mouth as the fragrance of grain and salted fish came out to meet him. Stepping into the gloom, he felt his way from shelf to shelf, encountering the curve of bowls, the rough edge of a basket, the cool, sweating sides of the big water jug. Dripping a mug full, he splashed water freely on his lips and chin before he drank. There were a few crumbs in the basket and an onion in one of the bowls, but Gebu had left nothing else on purpose, Ranofer was certain. The onion was small, but he ate it. Thankful for part of Hecate's lunch at noon, then poured the crumbs carefully into his palm and licked it clean. Far from satisfying him, the sketchy meal only whetted his appetite. Moreover, the onion had made his lips smart and burn. He was swelling rapidly and felt as big as a duck's egg. More water eased his throbbing lip, but not his hunger. He left the storeroom, banging the door behind him, and started for a sleeping mat under the tree. Halfway there, his audacious thought stopped him. Slowly, he turned toward the stairs. Gebu had frequently threatened to beat him insensible if he ever set foot in that upper room. On the other hand, Ranofer was in the mood to ignore all threats and defy Gebu if he could. Moreover, he was ready to wager his one shinty there was food hidden away up there, and Gebu was gone. Next instant, he was creeping toward the stairs. It was almost full dark, but the moon god Thoth's heavenly bark, which revealed its high-prowed boat shape clearly this evening in its waning, was beginning to shed a gentle radiance over the littered pavement. Keeping well in the deep shadows near the wall, Ranofer hurried up the worn and slanting steps, his mind full of enticing images, honey cakes, a whole keg of dried fish, a handful of sweet and sticky dates. He reached the passage and moved to the closed door at its end. There he paused, breathing hard, his ears straining for any sound below. Then he tugged at the bolt. It resisted. He tugged harder, bracing his shoulder against the door. At last it gave way with a jolt, and the door swung open. The thin squeal of the leather hinges made him shiver in spite of himself. He stepped into the room. It was windowless, like all Egyptian dwellings, but just over the level of Ranofer's head, the walls ended, and widely spaced posts rose from them to support the ceiling several feet above. Through the space, thus open to the fresh air of evening, moonlight poured in deeply, lighting Gebu's frayed sleeping mat and baked clay headrest, a stool or two, a box in one corner, and a battered wooden chest in another. Ranofer tried the chest first. He found nothing there but a coal pot half full of the black eye paint, a copper mirror, a razor, and a little jar of the ointment Gebu had been perfuming himself with lately. The chest looked no more promising. He fumbled hastily among sandals, headcloths, a couple of coarse white linen shinties, 4 sizes larger than the one wrapped around his own narrow hips, and several of the new fine woven ones. There was nothing hard and curving in a corner, wrapped in a scrap, there was something hard and curving in a corner, wrapped in a scrap of cloth rag. It might be a jug of honey. He tugged it out, jerked the cloth away impatiently, and went numb all over with the shock of what he saw. There in his hand lay a gold goblet more beautiful than the sun. For a moment he stood perfectly still. Then he sank to his knees, for his legs had suddenly become too weak to support him. In a shaft of moonlight, he examined his find more carefully. It was pure gold, exquisitely fashioned in the shape of a lotus blossom. An inlaid band around its rim was of priceless silver, and so was its delicate stem. It was the work of some master who was Zhao's equal or superior, and worth a prince's ransom. Gebu had stolen it. That was certain. But where? From whom? There was not a gold house in the city of the dead that produced such work as this. Only Zhao could have made it, and Ranofer was growing more and more uncertain whether even Zhao could have or would have. There was something about it that was different from the work one saw nowadays, the manner of finishing the inside of the base, for instance. Perhaps it had been made long ago and handed down to some rich noble from his father. Ranofer bent closer. Was that a bit of picture writing, etched into the golden curve of the petal? He twisted it to catch the light and saw a group of hieroglyphics enclosed in an oval line, the sign of royalty. Just so were the names of kings always written with an oval line about them. Had that accursed one stolen from the palace itself? But how under heaven could anyone have done that? Perhaps he could read the name, if the light were sufficient, if he had not forgotten too many of his little pictures he'd learned at the scribe school. Slowly, one by one, he spelled out the hieroglyphs. Thutmose, Nefer, Keperu. Ranofer's hand grew slowly icy, while he knelt staring at the goblet as if it turned to an adder in his grasp. It's like a snake. He read the inscription again and still again, but there was no mistake. This treasure bore the name of Thutmose, the conqueror pharaoh of Egypt over 100 years ago. Gebu had robbed a tomb. There was no other explanation. Suddenly, all Ranofer wanted was to get the goblet back into the chest and himself out of the evil room. Clumsy with fright and haste, he dropped the cotton rag 3 times before he was able to wrap it about the goblet as it had been before. He knew very well his life would not be worth a copper if Gebu came home at this moment. He thrust the bundle deep into the chest and with shaking hands scattered the shinties and headcloths over it, shut the battered lid, and sprang for the stairs. He did so as his bare feet grated on something gritty in the doorway. He stopped, peering down at scattered particles of dried clay on the moonlit floor. What was this? Some trap? He whirled to examine the bolt. Only then did he see that it had been sealed with a lump of clay and marked with a clear imprint of Gebu's scarab ring, an imprint which was now half broken away by the door having been opened. One glance, and Gebu would know he had been in his room. Wow. Wonder what's going to happen now, because we know that tomb robbers get hung. So for Gebu, it could be life or death that Ranofer has found this goblet. And it could mean Ranofer's death. Gebu could be that angry with him. We'll soon see. Bye-bye.